The war took place in August 2008 following a period of worsening relations between Russia and Georgia, both formerly constituent republics of the Soviet Union. The fighting took place in the strategically important Transcaucasia region, which borders the Middle East. It was regarded as the first European war of the 21st century. The Republic of Georgia declared its independence in early 1991 as the Soviet Union weakened. Amidst this backdrop, a 1991–1992 war between Georgia and separatists left parts of the territory of the former South Ossetian Autonomous Oblast under de facto Russian-backed and internationally unrecognized separatist control. After the war, a joint peacekeeping force of Georgian, Russian and Ossetian troops was stationed in the territory. Meanwhile, a similar situation developed during a 1992–1993 war in the region of Abkhazia. After a prolonged lull, relations between Georgia and Russia began to deteriorate drastically in April 2008. Ossetian separatists began shelling Georgian villages on 1 August, with a sporadic response from Georgian peacekeepers in the region. The Georgian army was sent to the conflict zone on 7 August to defend civilians and restore order. Most of Tskhinvali, capital of the self-proclaimed Republic of South Ossetia, was recaptured in hours. Georgia later said it was also responding to Russia moving non-peacekeeping units into the country. Russia accused Georgia of aggression against South Ossetia, and officially launched a large-scale land, air and sea invasion of Georgia on 8 August under the guise of peace enforcement operation. Russian and Ossetian forces battled Georgian forces throughout South Ossetia for 4 days, with the heaviest fighting in Tskhinvali, until Georgian forces retreated. Russian and Abkhaz forces opened a second front by attacking the Kadori Gorge, held by Georgia. Russian naval forces blockaded part of the Georgian coast. This was the first war in history in which cyber warfare coincided with military action. An active information war was also waged during and after the conflict. President of France Nicolas Sarkozy negotiated a ceasefire agreement on 12 August. Russian forces temporarily occupied the Georgian cities of Zugdidi, Senaki, Pota, and Gori, and raided Georgian military bases. The South Ossetians destroyed most ethnic Georgian villages in South Ossetia and were responsible for an ethnic cleansing of Georgians. Russia recognized Abkhazia and South Ossetia as separate republics on 26 August. In response, the Georgian government severed diplomatic relations with Russia. Russia mostly completed its withdrawal of troops from Georgia proper on 8 October. In the aftermath, Russia's international relations were largely unharmed. The war displaced 192,000 people, and while many returned to their homes after the war, 20,272 people remained displaced as of 2014. The Russian military has occupied Abkhazia and South Ossetia in violation of the ceasefire since August 2008. Background: history. In the 10th century AD, Georgia for the first time emerged as an ethnic concept in the territories where the Georgian language was used to perform Christian rituals. After the Mongol invasions of the region, the Kingdom of Georgia eventually was broken up into several kingdoms and principalities. In the 19th century, the Russian Empire gradually annexed the Georgian lands. In the aftermath of the Russian Revolution, Georgia declared its independence on 26 May 1918. The Ossetian people are indigenous to North Ossetia, located in the North Caucasus. Controversy surrounds the date of Ossetian arrival in Transcaucasia. In 1918, conflict began between the landless Ossetian peasants living in Shida-Kartli, who were influenced by Bolshevism and demanded ownership of the lands they worked, and the Menshevik government-backed ethnic Georgian aristocrats, who were legal owners. Although the Ossetians were initially discontented with the economic policies of the central government, the tension soon transformed into ethnic conflict. During uprisings in 1919 and 1920, the Ossetians were covertly supported by Soviet Russia, but even so, were defeated. The independent Democratic Republic of Georgia was invaded by the Red Army in 1921, and a Soviet government was installed. The government of Soviet Georgia created an autonomous administrative unit for Transcaucasian Ossetians in April 1922. Called the South Ossetian Autonomous Oblast. Historians such as Stephen F. Jones, Emil Soleimanov and Arsen Saparov believed that the Bolsheviks granted this autonomy to the Ossetians in exchange for their help in fighting the Democratic Republic of Georgia. Since this area had never been a separate entity prior to the Russian invasion, nationalism in Soviet Georgia emerged in 1989 when the weakening of the Soviet Union began. The Kremlin endorsed South Ossetian nationalism as a counter against the Georgian independence movement. On the 11th of December 1990, the Supreme Soviet of Georgia abolished the South Ossetian Autonomous Region. Georgia declared its restoration of independence on the 9th of April 1991, thus becoming the first non-Baltic state of the Soviet Union to do so. A military conflict broke out between Georgia and South Ossetia in January 1991, which lasted until June 1992. The separatists were aided by former Soviet military units now under Russian command. The war resulted in South Ossetian separatists achieving de facto independence from Georgia. After the Sochi Agreement in 1992, Georgian, South Ossetian, Russian and North Ossetian peacekeepers were stationed in South Ossetian conflict zone under the Joint Control Commission's mandate. Some parts of the former South Ossetian Autonomous Oblast remained under the Georgian control. This situation was mirrored in Abkhazia, an autonomous republic in the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic, where the Abkhaz minority seceded from Georgia during the early 1990s. The population of Abkhazia was reduced to 216,000 after an ethnic cleansing of Georgians, a decrease from 525,000 before the war. Similar to South Ossetia, an unrecognized government did not control the entire territory of Abkhazia. Russian interests and involvement. Transcaucasia lies between the Russian region of the North Caucasus and the Middle East, forming a buffer zone between Russia and the Middle East. It borders Turkey and Iran. The strategic importance of the region has made it a security concern for Russia. Significant economic reasons, such as presence or transportation of oil, also affect interest in Transcaucasia. Control of Transcaucasia, according to Swedish academic Svante Cornell, would enable Russia to control Western influence in the geopolitically important region of Central Asia. Russia saw the Black Sea coast and the border with Turkey as invaluable strategic attributes of Georgia. Russia had more vested interest in Abkhazia than in South Ossetia, since the Russian military presence on the Black Sea coast was seen as vital to Russian influence in the Black Sea. Before the early 2000s, South Ossetia was originally intended as a tool to retain a grip on Georgia. Vladimir Putin became president of the Russian Federation in 2000, which had a radical impact on Russo-Georgian relations. The conflict between Russia and Georgia began to escalate in December 2000, when Georgia became the first and only member of the Commonwealth of Independent States on which the Russian visa regime was imposed. In December 2001, Eduard Kokoiti, an alleged member of organized crime, became de facto president of South Ossetia. He was endorsed by Russia since he would subvert the peaceful reintegration of South Ossetia into Georgia. The Russian government began massive distribution of Russian passports to the residents of Abkhazia and South Ossetia in 2002 without Georgia's permission. This passportization policy laid the foundation for Russia's future claim to these territories. In 2003, President Putin began to consider the possibility of a military solution to the conflict with Georgia. After Georgia deported 4 suspected Russian spies in 2006, Russia began a full-scale diplomatic and economic war against Georgia, accompanied by the persecution of ethnic Georgians living in Russia. By 2008, most residents of South Ossetia had obtained Russian passports. According to Reuters, Russia supplied 2/3 of South Ossetia's annual budget before the war. Russian officials had de facto control of South Ossetia's security institutions, including the armed forces. South Ossetia's de facto government was largely staffed with Russians and South Ossetians with Russian passports, who had occupied equivalent government positions in Russia. Unresolved conflicts. The conflicts in Georgia remained at a stalemate until 2004, when Mikhail Saakashvili came to power after Georgia's Rose Revolution, which ousted President Eduard Shevardnadze. Restoring South Ossetia and Abkhazia to Georgian control was a top priority of Saakashvili's. The Georgian government launched an initiative to retake South Ossetia in 2004 after its success in restoring control in Agera. Intense fighting took place between Georgian forces and South Ossetian militia between 8 and 19 August. At the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg in January 2005, Georgian President Saakashvili proposed a peace settlement for South Ossetia within a unified Georgian state. The proposal was rejected by South Ossetian President Eduard Kokoiti. In 2006, Georgia sent security forces to the Kadori Valley region of Abkhazia, when a local militia leader rebelled against Georgian authorities. In 2007, Georgia established what Russia called their puppet government in South Ossetia, led by Dmitry Sanakoyev, calling it a provisional administration. Georgia began proposing the placement of international peacekeeping forces in the separatist regions when Russia began to apply pressure on Georgia. After April 2008, the West launched new initiatives for peace settlement, with peace plans being offered and conferences being organized by the European Union, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and Germany. Georgia accepted the German project for Abkhazia, but the separatists dismissed it. Russia and the separatists did not attend an EU-funded peace conference on Abkhazia. They also dismissed an OSCE offer to renew talks regarding South Ossetia. Relations between Georgia and the West. One of President Saakashvili's primary goals for Georgia was NATO membership, which has been one of the major stumbling blocks in Georgia-Russia relations. Although Georgia has no significant oil or gas reserves, its territory hosts part of the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline supplying Europe. The pipeline circumvents both Russia and Iran. Because it has decreased Western dependence on Middle Eastern oil, the pipeline has been a major factor in the United States' support for Georgia. During the NATO summit in Bucharest in April 2008, American President George W. Bush lobbied for offering a membership action plan to Georgia and Ukraine. However, Germany and France said that offering MAP to Ukraine and Georgia would be an unnecessary offense to Russia. NATO stated that Ukraine and Georgia would become members of the alliance and pledged to review the applications for MAP in December 2008. Russian President Vladimir Putin was in Bucharest during the summit. At the end of the summit on 4 April, Putin said that expansion of NATO to Russia's borders would be taken in Russia as a direct threat to the security of our country. After the Bucharest summit, Russia became more aggressive and began to actively prepare for the invasion of Georgia. Chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces Yuri Baluyevsky said on the 11th of April that Russia would take steps of a different nature, in addition to military action, to prevent NATO membership of former Soviet republics. General Baluyevsky admitted in 2012 that when the decision to attack Georgia was taken by President Putin before Dmitry Medvedev assumed the office, of president in May 2008. A military action was planned and explicit orders were issued in advance before August 2008. Russia aimed to stop Georgia's accession to NATO and also to bring about a regime change.